Welcome to Stars of Service. I'm your host, Brian Christiansen. You know, it takes a lot to get the right combination, the right ingredients for something to work. And especially when you have been working on something for so long, you have either been maybe in the military, most of us, but you've got something else cooking on the side. To have the knowledge, the know-how, and the time spent with a combination of everything else going on in your life, and you're able to do all of these, it's just a perfect recipe. I'm not talking about cooking, and I want to talk about beer instead. I've got my friend Joe Vogelbacher, the CEO of Sugar Creek Brewery. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
And the secret is you are also, or actually you still are in the Navy Reserve.
Yes.
Okay, so you've got a combination of time spent in service and also you're the CEO of a brewery. Oh, and by the way, also a nonprofit on the side and your family. Okay, first of all, take us back. You're in the Navy. Talk about your job.
Well, I graduated from the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy in 2002. Um, Studied marine engineering, and I commissioned as a reserve officer in the Navy. So all the graduates from Merchant Marine Academy go right into the reserve. So kind of an unusual thing where I didn't have active duty initially, but went straight into the reserve component.
What was that like?
Um, I think it was a shock when I got to college when you kind of expect the normal college experience, but you instead are jumping into a military regiment and you get training and your strict discipline and things like that for the first year or so, and then it kind of loosens up and you get focused on your C year and you get focused on studying, get your engineering degree and stuff like that. So once I got out of school, then I went to work for Northrop Grumman as a nuclear engineer, working on the CVN 69 Eisenhower.
Nuclear engineer. I'm just going to stop you there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're all of this. What's your typical day like?
Um, so back then, yeah, I was you know work, working on the ship CVN 69 the Eisenhower. They were doing a refueling, and would go and show up, and I assisted with testing and commissioning all the equipment on board the ship.
Right.
So on the nuclear side, on the aircraft carrier, there's two sides. There's a non-nuclear and a nuclear side. One side touches the reactor. I worked on that side, and basically on the deck plate on the ship every day for around 5 years. So walk down there, go down 10 flights of stairs, go into the ship, work on the ship, and then on the weekends you do your you do your Navy drill.
Right. And for a lot of people who don't know what well, in my case, the Air National Guard or in yours, the Reserve, kind of the same thing, but weekend warriors, you have probably a full-time job
hmm
and doing this on the weekends.
Yeah.
Talk about that transition from a Friday afternoon at your regular job and go into your Saturday, your weekend.
It's well, probably as good as anybody. I think it's like every third week you end up working 2 weeks straight. So, the going right
Yes.
in and then doing traveling and showing up there and putting on your Navy hat and then getting to work, doing that for 2 days and traveling back. You just show back up to work on Monday and you're exhausted. But and it's kind of hard to shift gears, but after a while
Right.
you learn.
Yeah, that Monday following is just the most brutal day possible, and you can't wait for that second Friday for sure. Um, so you went from there. When did you in Charlotte? You started up brewery,
hmm
Sugar Creek. So talk about how that became nuclear engineer
hmm
brewer. How
Sure.
did that become a thing?
Well, there was a gap in between there, and for 8 years, I'll back up a little bit.
Yeah.
So, um, punching the clock and marching into work and the 9 to 5 has just never been for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more of I don't know. My dad calls me a sadist, but I must be. But I'm always up for a challenge, and I always wanted to go into business for myself, and I've had the entrepreneurial spirit my whole life. So after about 4.5 years working at the shipyard, I went into business, into the construction supply business, and that's a whole nother longer story that we probably don't have time for. But I did that for 8 years and partnered with my cousin in New Jersey. And then around the eighth year, there was my sister came down with stage 4 liver cancer, and so at that point, I was living in New Jersey. She was living in Charlotte. I'm from Charlotte, and I went to school here. I went to St. Anne's Catholic School and then Charlotte Catholic High School. Um, I was kind of looking for something different to do that was maybe a little bit less stressful.
Right.
Um, and I had some good friends here in Charlotte that were in the restaurant business, and we got wind that Old Mecklenburg was selling their leasehold improvements and their assets and expanding and kind of going down the street.
I remember that.
And so we made a off market deal with John Marino from Old Mecklenburg to purchase everything, purchase the lease, and move ourselves into the building
Mhm.
in South End. And at the time, I was just going to be an investor from with a group of friends to open the brewery, but over a little bit more time and learning about my sister's situation, I decided to come in with a larger stake, and then I became the operating partner and the CEO. So I did that, and then for the first year when we opened Sugar Creek, I ran my business up in New Jersey and kind of winded that down, and then the brewery, and kind of went back and forth for the first 6 months to 8 months, and then took about a year and a half to wind the business down in New Jersey, restart here in Charlotte.
So you've got 5 things going on at the same time.
Yeah,
Fortunately, your sister,
yeah.
the brewery, the job up there, the reserves, the family. I somehow counted that in my head just now. What at what point did you say, "This is a lot. I'm really beginning to feel it, and I need to pull something out to balance the rest."
I still am in a position where I need to do that, where I still have too much on the plate and kind of need to focus, because it's hard to be, you know, it's hard to be a master of all things, right?
Right.
You want to kind of focus in and pick something that you like and do it. But for me, I guess it's just in my nature. I've always wanted to do a lot of different things and get involved in the community and just, go full speed ahead. But now after doing it for, 25 years, I'm at a position where I'm reevaluating things and trying to take a little bit better care of my health. I think it is kind of a sobering experience when you see when you lose some friends to things like a heart attack,
Yeah.
in your 40s. So stress will get you for sure. So try to take a little time to myself and do some deep breathing and scale back a little bit when I can. But I've kept my foot on the gas for for a long time now.
I can understand that, but
Yeah.
I just can't, fathom, having that much on my plate and nothing falls off of it. It's like going to the Cracker Barrel or the Golden Corral buffet and just keep on putting stuff and it just doesn't fall off. Um, I wanna take a quick break, and when we come
Sure.
back, I wanna hear more about, um, this, giving back to the community part and, also you're also in a movie,
Hmm.
and, I watched that last night. And I wanna talk about it a little later, but, it is something remarkable,
Sure.
and you have a title that not many people have. That's a if that's not a tease, I tried my best. Welcome back to Stars of Service. I'm your host, Brian Christiansen. I've got Joe Vogelback with me, and we are talking about this plate that he somehow maintains and balances and everything that he is a part of. One of those things, and you started to talk about um, your own health and others, and you began to talk about how you wanted to give back in to the community. Open up about that a little.
Sure. Well, when we started the brewery, one of my reasons was to kind of be closer to my sister. She was, like I said, battling a rare type of liver cancer called cholangiocarcinoma. And that was, let's see, we founded the brewery in 2014, and she had gotten diagnosed, I believe, the year before. So seeing her in her 40s dealing with that, kind of makes you reevaluate things.
Right.
Every day isn't guaranteed, and so um, spend some time with her and much as I could. And then going back to the service component, kind of randomly out of the blue, and I had been in, I believe, 18 years up to this point. The Charlotte Navy base called me in 2016 and said, "Hey, we're mobilizing you to Kabul, Afghanistan with the Army." And I was thinking, wait a second, I'm a marine engineer. I work on ships, merchant marine guy. And you're going to send me to the Army. How does that make sense? So I had just started the brewery and, working there and getting things rolling and we were growing and all of that. And immediately got shipped to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, went through combat training and then sent to Afghanistan. Uh, which was a crazy experience. But, I think God works in mysterious ways, so to speak. And I had a 14-month deployment, and fortunately, um, they reduced my deployment because it was right at the time when President Obama was transitioning over to President Trump, and one of his last things was an order to draw troops down in Afghanistan.
Right.
So the billet that I was in actually got cut and replaced with a government contractor. So after 114 days in theater, I was released. So I was happy because I was, hey, job well done,
Right.
mission accomplished. I'll head back. Got to spend a little time with my sister, and then unfortunately, um, it was like a year and a half later, she passed away
I'm
from cholangiocarcinoma.
sorry.
So while she was alive, she was the breadwinner in the family and made made the money for them all. And so when she was dealing with her treatments and things like that, she was financially impacted. So I figured, well, we have this resource, the brewery, even though we weren't making a lot of money, we were in the community and we could rally community resources. So we did that for my sister Michelle 2 years in a row, where we raised funds and kind of gave it to her to help out with her car payment or mortgage, just living expenses and things like that. And then when we called that event that we did for her, we called it Michelle's Mighty Mission. So we donated a portion of the proceeds to the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation, and then we gave some to her in order to help her, best battle her illness and focus on that rather than the days that she was missing on with work.
Right.
So when she passed away, I took a year off, and then I was thinking, well, why not just continue the tradition and see if we could donate the money somewhere else in the community? And my sister Michelle always said, "Hey, if my cancer could be used for anything good," she was completely for it. So I kind of continued on the tradition in her spirit, and that's where our Michelle's Mighty Mission Rowathon came. And I guess the next question is kind of a segue into where does the 24 Foundation fit in all of this? So once we had started the Rowathon and raising money for charity, we decided to donate it to 24 Foundation, and then very quickly, I would pull the money into an account at the brewery and then write one check to over to 24 Foundation. Very quickly, I became one of the one of the largest individual donors for the foundation. So at that point, the founder of the organization, Spencer Luters, had asked me to come on the board if I wanted to, and I said no because I was studying for the Cicerone exam, which we'll get into, I guess, a little bit later.
Yeah.
Eventually, I got through that process, and I joined the board, and somehow, I don't know how, but I ended up rolling up through the board member into the executive committee and secretary, vice chair, and then I did the chairman of the board for 2 years, and then rolled off this year.
One more for the plate.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it wasn't too bad though.
what so you've got, with being chairman of the board for the 24 Foundation and
Mhm.
and several other elements to that. What was that what was that like to you've got all of these other things going on in your life, but
Mhm.
that one element that you're, hey, I can give back and uh, almost, I don't want to use the word therapy, but at the same time, it's to go and it's probably the best part about your day.
Yeah, I mean, the time involvement in the reserves can add up really quick. That's like almost 10 hours a week. And then when we're busy, so that's every week, 10 hours a week, really adds up a lot. And then, you're doing another 20 to 30 days active duty a year. With the 24 Foundation, it's really just one meeting a month uh, or so, and then a board meeting once a quarter. And what I tried to do there was kind of set the example for the other board members and let them know, hey, you can utilize your network and your resources for good. You don't necessarily have to write the check yourself, but if you can pool your resources and inspire other people to give, then that's how you can really be a force multiplier, so to speak. So, being in the Navy and working out of the Charlotte base for a while, I work out of Norfolk now, but working out of the Charlotte base, there's 1,000 or so reservists there that I would interact with regularly. And so I'd tell them that I was, one of the founders of the Sugar Creek Brewery, and they thought that was interesting and neat. So I would bring them to the brewery, show them some about
Make
our
some
beers,
make some great
yeah,
friends.
and then tell them about the 24 Foundation. So it all kind of worked together. And then when I had events, I have that network of people to tap into and kind of get them involved because you just never know. I mean, people everywhere have been touched by cancer. So when I share my story, then a lot of times they can find it resonates with them, and which case then we can get them involved in giving back.
So one quick question, and then we'll take a quick break. But your commitment to serve is superior to anyone I've ever even met. You've got so much going on, and you want to serve your country. You want to serve your community, serve those who need help. What's the drive behind all?
Well, I can't say that it's all totally altruistic. I wish I said I could, but I get a lot back from all of that. I mean, it's a privilege to be in the military, and I get a lot of benefits from that. And they do pay me to show up, so that's a
Yeah, it's a
good
little
benefit.
bonus.
Yeah,
And a
and
retirement check eventually too. Yes.
yeah, and doing this stuff with the 24 Foundation, I'm actually rolling off the board now. So this is my last year. So I feel like that chapter is kind of winding down. And while I was there and had the energy to get the ball rolling, I felt like that was a privilege too. And I get to do something in remembrance of my sister. I get a tremendous feeling of warmth when I look around the room and see 250 people that are all ready to go and raise money. And I met some people, my sister's friends and her healthcare providers,
Right.
and people that I didn't even know were in the picture come in and talk to me, and get to interact here on Queen City News and get my dad involved. And it's just a good, warm feeling. And um, that's what keeps you going.
Um, let's take a quick break and hear about the movie that you're.
Mhm.
I've talked a little bit about how you're in a movie.
Mhm.
I actually watched it last night.
That's cool.
So what exactly is it?
So when we opened the brewery and I transitioned from being in sales role and doing engineering, I had to learn about beer. And to do that, I could have, at the time there wasn't a lot of college programs where you could go study, or you couldn't go to the local community college. You had to kind of read and learn it on their own. So on your own. So what I did was I investigated the different routes on where I could have a structured format and learning about beer and kind of becoming developing myself as a professional. And I found the Cicerone program. Cicerone program is a credentialing program for beer professionals, people that work in the business. and that are involved in all aspects of the business.
Right.
And in the Cicerone program, there's 4 levels, very similar to the Court of Master Sommeliers.
Correct.
And there's a level 1, which is certified beer server, then certified Cicerone, then advanced Cicerone, then Master Cicerone. The program's been around for around 12 years, and it certifies, like I said, beer professionals of various levels of expertise. So in 2018, I believe it was. Sometimes I get my timelines mixed up, so don't
I don't know
mess with me.
how, we've
Uh,
only just got a couple things going on in your life.
And then 2018, I was studying and working my way through that, and I had became one of the first 20, I believe, to pass the advanced Cicerone, which is level 3. I was approached by a group of guys that were doing a documentary, kind of in the spirit of the wine one called Somm, where they were documenting the beer professional's journey to get to the Master Cicerone
Right.
level. So they interviewed all the people that had passed the advanced Cicerone and having come to Sugar Creek and seeing what I was doing, and they and knowing that my sister was sick and all of that kind of stuff. Um, they offered me to participate, and then I worked with them for about a year or so, while they filmed me and filmed my studying and a little bit about the brewery. And I think I became one of the 4 main characters in the film. It was bought and distributed by Gravitas Entertainment, which is the largest documentary firm in the world. So it was distributed internationally and then a little bit nationally. It was on Hulu, Amazon Prime, and YouTube, I believe, but it didn't make the Netflix cut for whatever reason.
It's there on Amazon.
Yeah, oh, that's cool.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Yeah.
The one thing one of the opening lines that you see that you're on, and you talk about, I want to actually read the note that you said, and then it was the very humble. My favorite thing about beer is it brings people together.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, right after that, you said, "Let me get back to you." You remember that?
Oh, it's been a little while,
Okay.
but
I won't take you down
yeah,
that.
you're
It's
fine.
just, let's go back to the title, Cicerone, right?
Cicerone, that's an
Cicerone.
old English word.
Thank you.
It means a guide.
Got it. And how long is this test?
Well, each level is exponentially harder as they go up. So the level 2 is roughly twice as hard as level 1, and then level 3 is roughly twice as hard as level 2, and then level 4 is roughly twice as hard as level 3. So the final exam, Master Cicerone exam, is a 2-day exam, roughly 10 hours a day. It's filled with 5 or 6 oral boards on each day. It's filled with around 30 blind beer tastings on each day. And then it's filled with essay questions on each day, and then practical exams. The essay questions were, at the time I did it, handwritten, and I believe over the course of 2 days, I wrote a little over 100 pages in
Oh my
answers to
gosh.
questions. Yeah, around 50 pages a day.
So they're giving you blind taste testing, and
Yeah,
you're basically, I can notes of coffee or
sure.
whatever the case is. How did that change your view of or your taste of beer?
The whole process of was really the reward. Doing the studying, the putting myself in the network with the other people that were striving to do that, because they're all really smart, capable, and celebrated professionals in the beer industry. So jumping in there, it was a fast track to kind of meeting other people
Right.
and going to the right courses and learning about things. And my thought was always, how can you make a world class beer if you can't taste what a world class beer is?
Hmm.
So taste is a small part of the exam. It totals to roughly 15% of the overall score, and you need 85% accuracy to pass the final exam. But um, yeah, so everybody's always interested in the tasting portion, but there's a
Right.
lot of other stuff as well involved in it.
Of course. I'm just going to wrap it up with this. You are serving literally beer. You're serving your community, serving those who need help, those who are underneath your leadership. What can you tell any person who happens to be going into the military, who's serving right now? What are your words of wisdom for serving?
I think I like to encourage everybody that's a reservist or active duty, or if you're active duty going into reservist, to stick with it because time flies, and before you know it, like I have 23 years in right now, and I'm still going, and I'd like to keep going if I could, all the way, and until they won't let me stay anymore, is what I like to do because I love to travel and I love to see new things and meet new
Right.
people. And so I would just encourage somebody to stick with it and know that you might not think that you have money or resources or networks, but you usually do. If you dig down a little bit deep, you can find those things. So I think, if you're healthy and you're living here in America, then you owe it to your neighbor and your community to be a part and do your part.
Perfect. Cheers to that.
Thank you.
Joe, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time on Stars of Service.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.